Hello, and welcome back to the Choose UCalgary Podcast. As always, I'm your Season 8 host, Karah, and today we're sitting down with Trevor Tombe, an economics professor and research fellow with the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, to speak about our undergraduate economics program. Stay tuned to hear more. Welcome to the Choose UCalgary Podcast, Trevor. We're just going to start with a quick introduction of yourself and your role at the University of Calgary.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me on. It's really great to be here. So I'm, Trevor Tombe, a professor of economics at the University of Calgary and a research fellow at the School of Public Policy. And I've been here for about 10 years. So I came here not right out of graduation. I used to be a professor at Wilfrid Laurier University out in Waterloo, Ontario. I did my grad school at the University of Toronto, undergrad at Simon Fraser University, so been, across the country a little bit over the years, but Calgary has definitely been a great home, especially for a younger scholar to really start their career. So it's been a really wonderful, 11 plus years or so now that I've been here. And I guess my focus in terms of my research and teaching is really spans a lot of areas. So I do a lot on international trade and internal trade, like between states or provinces within a country, which doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's just as important as international trade. But also public finance, macroeconomic issues like inflation, productivity, and growth, certainly big topics these days. And then teaching, I do quite a bit in the Department of Economics, but I'm also spread out to other areas as well. I teach at the School of Public Policy. So they have a graduate program there, the Masters of Public Policy. Also teach in the Executive MBA program in Haskayne, the business school here on campus. And then finally, I do some one-day courses through continuing education. So that's usually targeted to members of the community, really provide a lot of lifelong learning experiences that touch on topical areas. So I've done courses on equalization, for example, a hot topic in Alberta, or now the pension proposal that's come out. We're going to do a series of courses on that next year. So teaching in a lot of areas on campus, research spread across a lot of areas, and I think that speaks to what makes, at least for me, economics such an interesting area. Basically anything can be a topic of investigation by economists, and that I think really makes it a very interesting area to get into.
Yeah, it's definitely a very broad topic. It covers a lot more than what people can kind of see on the surface.
Yeah, I like to think of it more as a way of thinking and a set of tools that can be applied to so many diverse research questions and not even just constrained to what we typically think of as the economy and markets. It's really about how we make decisions and understanding those on an individual basis. So our department head here on campus, for example, does a lot of behavioral laboratory work. Someone whose research might be very much at home in a psychology department, because it is really just about trying to understand individual decision making in lots of different contexts. And part of that is, of course, how all of our decisions kind of combine. There's millions, tens of millions of Canadians making decisions every day. How does that aggregate to the level of a whole province or a whole country or a whole world? So economics is just the study of decision making. It really does mean it is uniquely broad relative to many other disciplines.
Yeah, it kind of has its foot in different areas all around. And then, you kind of talked about this a little bit with your experience out east, but as a professor and a research fellow in the School of Public Policy, are you able to share your personal journey and experiences that led you to this role at the University of Calgary, and what makes the economics program here stand out to prospective students?
Sure. So I guess starting with my personal journey, I should confess that my undergraduate degree is in finance, and I did combine it with a kind of a double major in economics, but it is a Bachelor of Business Administration in finance from Simon Fraser. And what made me interested in economics there is finance incredibly interesting, don't get me wrong, but much more narrow than economics. Economics was, at least my experiences in those classrooms, was that it really opened my eyes to a lot more than what I got out of finance. So I found it much more interesting with so many directions that you could go pursuing economics. And that's really what led me to graduate school, which is an opportunity to take all of the wealth of knowledge that you gain in an undergraduate program and then start to do original research, answering a lot of the questions that percolate up in an undergraduate setting. And so that's what led me to the University of Toronto, doing grad school there, with the goal of being employed in academia, which is not easy. It's a pretty competitive space. So I was quite lucky that those opportunities came about. And yeah, being from Vancouver, Western Canada, being in Calgary is certainly a wonderful place to live for so many reasons beyond just the quality of the university and, and my experiences here, the proximity to the mountains, the city itself. And to be honest, there's some affordability challenges in Vancouver that Calgary doesn't have. And so that's, I guess, a very practical reason as well. And I guess as an aside, we're seeing many people from across Canada move to Calgary as a destination. We're seeing rates of interprovincial inflows to Alberta and Calgary in particular that we've never seen before, like ever since we started collecting these kind of records. So Calgary is really a destination spot, and so it's been really exciting to be a part of that energy. Now, I guess what makes our program stand out is, I think, all economics programs in Canada and across North America really are going to share a couple of common core features. You'll do your microeconomics and your macroeconomics and your econometrics, which is, think of it as statistics, but applied in a particular way. But where we, I guess, really shine is bringing in a very applied focus, a very practical approach to economics. Yep, you'll get your theory. There's no avoiding that. But very data-oriented, very practically oriented faculty we have here on campus. Lots of empirical work being done by our faculty, and that's brought into the classroom as well. And the way that we design our program to ensure that students have opportunities for real practical experience in addition to the classroom setting. And so maybe we could talk more about those, but internship programs that are available, very applied programs focused on many different areas, including energy economics, which was a real strength of ours, but opportunities to compete also in the Bank of Canada's Governor's Challenge, which is really exciting. Maybe I'll talk about that in a bit, but we really do try and make the program both rigorous, but also very focused on applied policy questions that are critically important today.
Yeah, definitely. Having that kind of like hands-on research really does elevate that educational experience to the next level that you can't get when you're just sitting in a classroom. So it's really nice to know that that's kind of available all across the board around UCalgary, and not just in like those super science heavy classes. It's available in every program. So that's definitely really cool. And all those different opportunities, like you said, like the internships and the different kind of like out of University of Calgary opportunities that you can find. There sure are quite a few to choose between. Are there any that kind of stand out to you that you can think of?
Yeah. Maybe I'll note one that has been around here at the University of Calgary for almost 25 years, more than 20. So somewhere, just to give you a sense of how long it's been here. This is the summer internship in regulatory economics. And what this is it connects students. I think last year we had 8 going into formal internships at different corporate offices, different government entities, with real focus on regulatory economics. So not just in the energy sector either. So certainly a lot historically have gone into electricity, the market surveillance folks, or the electricity systems operator, or others go to pipeline companies. For example, we've also had internships placed at TELUS. Telecommunications is a regulated area where these questions are very important, competition policy very important. And so we've been placing students in these summer internship roles for 2 decades plus with great success, because this allows you to apply the knowledge that you've gained in your undergraduate settings to actual issues that either government regulators are facing or companies navigating those regulations are facing. And it also allows you a chance to not just see the real practical value of what you've learned in the program, but also demonstrate your knowledge and your expertise as a student to a potential employer.
Yeah.
And so being able to convert these internships into longer term positions is also something where there's a great deal of success. So I think that's a real jewel in the crown of the University of Calgary in general, and the economics program in particular.
Yeah, definitely. Again, like making those, long-term relationships with employers. So after graduation, you can have a little bit more security in where you're going, which is always something that we like to see.
Yeah.
And then, sorry,
yeah,
go
maybe
ahead.
It just popped into my head.
Yeah.
A potential second thing that I'll highlight that's
yeah.
relatively new that we're trying in the past couple of years, where we have a real big data capstone project for senior undergraduates, and we also allow some of our master's students to combine into this course as well. And this is where we have a couple faculty, Professor Alex Wally and Ben Cross in particular, who connect with different companies, different organizations, governmental departments as well, and bring them into the classroom to kind of pitch a problem. What's a challenge that you're facing as a firm, as a department, as an organization? And then students will utilize data, sometimes real data from these organizations, applying really robust empirical methods to try and answer this new question that is a legitimate problem for the organization, and the students are there answering that question, and then it kind of becomes what we call a capstone project, where it's at the end of the degree, typically, and it's a real way to apply, in particular, these empirical skills that we emphasize throughout the program.
Yeah, so that kind of like end of your degree, final, like you said, capstone project to add on to get that practical experience.
Yeah, and it's not just practical experience in the sense of doing work, but it's a question without an answer. It's a novel problem that you're trying to answer using your expertise that you've accumulated over several years as a student here on campus. So it's a way to really apply some rigorous but entrepreneurial thinking as well to a legitimate open question to help solve a problem for a real organization in real time.
Yeah, well, and again, that ties into, Canada's Entrepreneurial University, trying to embed that all over the place, and it doesn't have to just be in, like the commerce realm. It can be in economics and arts and sciences. It can be all around.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you received an offer to the University of Calgary? Do you want to explore campus and connect with your future faculty representatives? Come and join us on April 6, 2024 for You at UCalgary, your event for all things UCalgary future students. Details about how to register will be emailed to all those eligible to attend. And then as somebody who actively participates in research, are there different ways that you integrate your findings into your teaching? So like offering students an understanding of the real world applications of economic theories?
Constantly, especially these days. The past several years have been, and I don't just mean the pandemic, I mean even prior to the pandemic. So I do some teaching in international trade, for example. And if we think way back to 2017, 2016, 2017, when our trading relationship with the United States was in question, right? A new president elected there wanted to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. And roughly 1/3 of employment and economic activity in Canada is tied to trade with the United States. And this is a very serious issue if that trade agreement were to unravel. And so teaching international trade, even the first year international trade course that we offer, it's a second year course that we offer, but the first trade course you'd ever take here on campus, bringing in what's going on with the negotiations which are occurring while we're meeting as a course. Trying to apply different theories for, why might a government want to lower tariffs in one area but not another? What's actually the potential motivation behind some of the concerns in the United States around the agreement that we had? What are concerns in Canada? I mean, we're certainly willing to renegotiate these international arrangements, but what are areas where governments here might have concerns. Why might that be the case? How does that connect into the theory that we're learning in class in the textbook? And so we were able to apply that moment, which was very concerning, high stakes moment for Canada, right there into an international trade classroom.
Yeah.
And then today, think about, one of the biggest challenges on the minds of many Canadians is affordability and inflation. And we've seen inflation not just rise to levels that have never occurred in my lifetime.
Yeah.
They rose more quickly, from where they were to the peak of over 8%. The rapid acceleration is something that we haven't seen even before my parents were born.
Wow.
So there's a lot of really complex, multifaceted, interacting causes behind that we don't yet fully understand. So bringing in research into, in this case, a macroeconomics or maybe a monetary economics classroom, thinking about where does inflation come from.
Yep.
Can't avoid bringing in that research just because there's a lot of open questions around what's exactly going on. And it's going to be an area that we study for decades. People today are even making whole careers trying to understand aspects of the Great Depression, and we might be seeing that now. And so bringing in research, not just to try and inform how we see the world today, but also, for me at least, I like to try and spark students to think about questions that don't yet have answers. And that's the case not just in economics, but in so many areas. There's lots we don't know. And what universities are really there to try and do is answer those questions we don't know, really generate valuable knowledge for the world. And if we can spark students to have the passion for going forward and answering those questions, moving on to not just grad school, but answering questions in whatever areas they go forward to, I think that starts with bringing research into the classroom, especially research that doesn't just say what is, but also highlights what's left to learn. What do we not know?
Yeah, like taking it off the page and adding in that like real world element can really help to, I don't want to say make it more interesting, but just make it more relatable to the real world, and just being able to implement the research and what you're figuring out. And again, bringing in those questions that don't have answers can really leave students thinking and wondering and working on those problems. And that's kind of how we create those students who graduate and go on to solve those problems because they're already thinking about it from the classroom.
At the University of Calgary, you mentioned where we strive to be the most entrepreneurial university in the country. We also strive to ensure that what we do has impact, real impact on not just the local community, but the country as a whole and the world as a whole. And that impact means answering questions we don't have answers to, applying them in new ways, being really innovative in that thinking, and doing so with a real focus on the future. Like what's to come and how do we prepare for it? And at least that's how I approach the classroom and approach bringing research into it.
Yeah. Definitely. And then I know you kind of talked about where your focus is in economics, but are there any specific economic theories or concepts that you find particularly engaging to teach, or you find students really enjoy learning about in the classroom, and kind of how that creates a unique economics program for UCalgary students?
Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll talk about me, and then I'll talk about several of my colleagues who do some really frontier work and bring that into the classroom as well. So for me, I like areas that connect into active policy conversations that are taking place right now in real time. Pop onto a news website, or if anyone reads a newspaper still physically, what do we see in the headlines that's occurring, and really try and use that debate, the current debate, in the classroom to really anchor people's, understanding of what it is that we're doing. And so I do public finance in part. That's one of my core areas of teaching and research. And right now in Alberta, we are having this conversation around a potential Alberta pension plan. And young people, of course, naturally aren't going to be thinking too much about their pension, which is 4+ decades down the line. But I think it's really hard to avoid that policy discussion. You can hardly listen to a podcast now without that advertisement popping up from
Yep.
the government prompting you to think about it. And so really making sure we can bring in these issues, these real world, newsworthy policy issues into the material that we're covering. So I think something that not just demonstrates the value and usefulness of the economics way of thinking and understanding the world, but also raises these open questions and also often facilitates interesting discussion among students in the classroom, because often there's not one right or wrong way. There's multiple perspectives, and having that discussion and bringing it out in the classroom is very valuable.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of this episode of the Choose UCalgary podcast. Join us next week as we continue speaking with Trevor Tombe about our UCalgary economics program. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at choose.ucalgary and on Facebook at University of Calgary Future Students. As always, DM us if you have any questions.